you so much for being here. We'll start with Jaya Radha Madhava. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Gopi Jannavalabha Girivaradari. Jaya Gopi Jannavalabha Girivaradari. Yashoda Nandana Bhaja Janaranjana. Yashoda Nandana Bhaja Janaranjana. Ramunatira Vandachari. Ramunatira Vandachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hi. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 4, verses 4 and 5. Tvam yogino yajantyada Mahapurushamishvaram Saryatmam Sadhibhutam cha Sadhidevam cha sadava. Tvam yogino yajantyada Mahapurushamishvaram Saryatmam Sadhibhutam cha Sadhidevam cha sadava. Word for word. Tvam, for you. Yogina, yogis. Yajanti, perform sacrifice. Adha, certainly. Mahapurusham, for the Supreme Personality. Ishvaram, the Godhead. Sa'adyatmam, the witness of the living entities. Sa'adibhutam, of the material elements. Cha, and Sa'adidhaibham, of the controlling demigods. Cha, and Sadhava, purified persons. Translation: pure yogis worship you, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by conceiving of you in the threefold form comprising the living entities, the material elements that constitute the living entities' bodies, and the controlling deities of those elements. Text 5. Traya cha vidyaya kechit tvam vaivatanikodvicha yajante vittater yagir nanarupar marakyaya. Translation and purport by the disciples of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. Brahmanas who follow the regulations concerning the three sacred fires worship you by chanting mantras from the three Vedas and performing elaborate fire sacrifices for the various demigods who have many forms and names. Purport: Akrura has now described how those who follow the paths of Sankhya, Yoga, and the three Vedas worship the Supreme Lord in different ways. In the various places where the Vedas appear to recommend that one worship Indra, Varuna, and other demigods, these demigods are stated to be supreme. But at the same time, the Vedas state that there is one supreme controller, the absolute truth. That is Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, who expands his potency through material creation into the forms of the demigods. Thus, worship of the demigods goes to him through the indirect method of karma kanda, or fruitive religious rituals. Ultimately, however, one who wants to achieve eternal perfection should worship the Lord directly in full Krishna consciousness. Please pray with me. Om Agyanatimirandasya Janhanjana Chalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Dena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yen Bhutale Sayam Bhagavatam Tadadishva Purandikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yura Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagradatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vidam Tam Sajivam Sarvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakamitamcha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagapate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vandavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sure Devi Pranamami Hari Pre Vancha Kalpatarubhishta Kripa Sindhubhye Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Samine Dinamine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shanyavari Pashtachara Shatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, as we have been discussing, Akrura, he's really demonstrating how to go about our service and how to take shelter of the Lord. So we discussed in the previous classes how when Akrura was on his way to Vrindavan, he was praying the whole time. And immediately when he entered Sri Vrindavan Dham, he prayed, right? He had these beautiful prayers. And then when he got to Vrindavan, as we know, he was doing a very intense service that was not appreciated by the devotees. And yeah, it was very, very difficult. So during that time, Akrura was very focused, still in a prayerful mood, of course, but very focused on the service that he had to do, although it was difficult. And at this point now in the story, he has successfully, although it has been an extremely painful process, right? We heard about the residents of Vrindavan being in intense pain and crying because Krishna is their very life and soul. And, Mother Yashoda actually in agonizing pain, entrusting her son to Akrura, even though she bluntly said, I do not trust him. And then telling her husband, Nanda Maharaj, you must bring him back. And then she leaves the scene. And as we know, the gopis, they had stayed up the whole night speaking about Krishna. And then when it came time for Akrura to take Krishna away, they tried to stop the chariot by putting their bodies under the wheels and just crying in agony. And Akrura tried to explain to them, if you don't let Krishna go, you will be the cause of the death of Vasudeva and Devaki and so many people. And their response was, yeah, but there's time to figure that out. If you take Krishna now, all the residents of Vrindavan will die in separation. Yet still, Akrura had to take Krishna because Krishna had that service to do in Mathura. And Akrura was an instrument of that. So once Akrura takes the Lord on his chariot, and we heard how the cowherd men of Gokula and walked behind on the wagons, and the young gopis also walked behind for some distance. But then they were eventually placated by Krishna's glances and gestures and his message saying, I will return. And with their minds completely absorbed in Krishna, the cowherd girls stood as still as figures in a painting until they could no longer see the chariot's flag or the dust cloud being raised on the road. And then, chanting Krishna's glories all the while, they despondently returned to their homes. And then Akrura halts the chariot at the bank of the Yamuna so Krishna and Balaram could perform a ritual of purification and drink some water. And then after the lords get back onto the chariot, Akrura asks them permission to bathe in the Yamuna himself. And he recites Vedic mantras, and then he sees the two lords standing in the water. He's very confused, and he comes out of the water and returns to the chariot, and he sees the two lords still sitting there. And then he returns to the water to find out if those two figures he had seen were real or not. And then what happens is he sees in the water the four-armed Lord Vasudeva. It explains his complexion was dark blue like a fresh rain cloud. He wore yellow garments, and he lay on the lap of thousand-hooded Anantashesha. And Lord Vasudeva was receiving the prayers of perfected beings, celestial serpents and demons, and he was encircled by his personal attendants. Serving him were his many potencies such as Shri, Pushti, and Ila, and Brahma and other demigods sang his praises. And Akrura, he rejoices at this vision. And then joining his palms together, he begins to pray to the Supreme Lord in a voice choked with emotion. So now we're into his prayers, and we're just in text 4 and 5 of his prayers today. He begins his prayers by bowing down to the Lord and saying that basically from the whirl of the lotus born from his navel, Brahma appeared, and by Lord Brahma, through the agency of the Lord, this whole universe has come into being. So all of the material elements have come into being. And all of the different elements in the Mahat Tattva, material nature and her source, the mind, the senses, the sense objects, and the senses presiding deities, all of these are born from the transcendental body of the Lord. And the material nature and these other elements cannot know Krishna as he is because they're manifested in the realm of dull matter. But since Krishna is beyond the modes of material nature, even Lord Brahma, who is bound up in these modes, does not know Krishna's true identity. Which brings us to today's verse, where the Lord says, pure yogis worship you, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by conceiving of you in the threefold form comprising the living entities, the material elements that constitute the living entities' bodies, and the controlling deities of those elements. So these yogis, they're not worshiping the Lord directly, the Lord's form as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as Krishna, as the Bhakti yogis do, which we will explain in a moment. But they're seeing Krishna in this threefold form, or as part of the Virat Rupa, right? It's discussed in the Srimad Bhagavatam that yogis and also impersonalists, they can worship the Virat Rupa, which is not the actual transcendental body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, but it's actually an imaginary form that takes in all the different aspects of the material creation and makes a meditation of those different aspects as different parts of the Lord's form. Why? Because it's trying to get basically impersonalists or yogis to move from the impersonal conception of the Lord to gradually the personal conception of the Lord. It's meeting people where they're at. So the yogis, and then in the second verse about the brahmanas, they might not have a clear conception of transcendence, but they have to work up from things they understand, right? And that is a theme that, and I want to thank both my husband and Giri Govardhan Prabhu, who gave some thoughts on this verse. And one thing that Giri Govardhan Prabhu has always spoken to me a lot about is that, why do we have all these different Vedas, right? If the cream of Vedic literature is the Srimad Bhagavatam, and the goal of life is pure devotional service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, why did Vyasadeva bother to compile all of the other Vedic literatures, which are not necessarily propagating pure devotional service? And why do we have all these different chapters in the Bhagavad Gita, like speaking about karma yoga, jnana yoga, and ashtanga yoga? Why is this? It's because not everybody in this very moment, right, is ready to completely take shelter and surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that's actually what Akrura is doing in these prayers. He will pray such beautiful things, but the last 3 verses that he will chant are, being thus fallen, I am approaching your feet for shelter, O Lord, because although the impure can never attain your feet, I think it is nevertheless possible by your mercy. Only when one's material life has ceased, O lotus-naveled Lord, can one develop consciousness of you by serving your pure devotees. Only when one's material life has ceased, right? And only by serving the pure devotees. Obeisances to the supreme absolute truth, the possessor of unlimited energies. He is the embodiment of pure transcendental knowledge, the source of all kinds of awareness, and the predominator of the forces of nature that rule over the living being. O son of Vasudeva, obeisances to you, within whom all living beings reside. O Lord of the mind and senses, again I offer you my obeisances. O Master, please protect me, who am surrendered unto you. So Akrura, he's a pure devotee, right? And what is the purpose of prayers of a pure devotee? The purpose of prayers of a pure devotee is to seek protection from Maya and to receive shelter at the Lord's lotus feet. He is asking for protection. And what is protection? Protection, real protection, is being engaged in the devotional service of the Lord and always remembering the name, form, qualities, and pastimes of the Lord. This is our real protection from material energy. So this is the only thing that Akrura is asking for. But as we have discussed many times, the progression of prayers of pure devotees always starts with glorification of the Lord before asking for a benediction. So most of the prayers of Akrura are praising the Lord. And then at the end, he is asking for this benediction because he's so absorbed in the Lord's glories. So back to what we were saying, why do we have these different sections in the Bhagavad Gita and in the Srimad Bhagavatam? There's a progression that is in the ascending stages of yoga, which is shown in the Bhagavad Gita. And I'm actually going to share my screen so that you all can see this. The bottom starts with animal life, which is just, just not human, just eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. No transcendence there. And it's interested in satisfying material desires. And then above from that is karma kanda, which can be also considered the beginning of human life, where you at least begin to accept some authority, some Vedic scripture. However, it's still at that point interested in satisfying material desires. So at that point, you are basically following, you're basically doing good karma and performing pious acts so that you can get pious material results. Then moving on from that is karma yoga, which is accepting a transcendental goal and when you begin to become a yoga practitioner. But it's still very much in the realm of like, I do this work and I get this result, right? And then as you move, and it's in the mode of passion, karma yoga is in the mode of passion. If you move from passion to goodness and have an increased knowledge and detachment, you come to jnana yoga. Now, jnana yoga can progress to Ashtanga yoga, or it can go to Brahman realization. So jnana yoga and Ashtanga yoga are still within the realm of the material modes of nature. And then Ashtanga yoga can progress either to Brahman realization or to Paramatma realization. When we get up to Brahman realization and Paramatma realization, we're at the point of liberation where we're beyond the modes of material nature. But it's not until Bhakti Yoga is accepted and we surrender unto Krishna that we can come to Bhagavan realization. And it was actually so beautiful. My husband and I lead a beginning bhakti community group on Tuesday nights. And this topic actually came up yesterday, where we were discussing, someone asked, because I had put into the chat, because we're reading Rancher Prime's Bhagavad Gita. He's a disciple of Prabhupada, so it's based on Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita. And these people are like coming to Bhakti Center for the first time, and it's using the God word, and saying surrender to God. So we were talking a lot about God, and I just put into the WhatsApp group. We have a WhatsApp group for our community group in the last week that, like, please know, even if you don't feel comfortable with the word God, please use the word that you feel comfortable with, and know that everyone is welcome here. And I had explained how it's non-sectarian, Krishna, Allah, Christ, Jehovah, same name of the same God. But I said also, you can also substitute, universe, energy, like if that's what you feel more comfortable with. And I was so happy. A member of my community group raised her hand and said, I have a question about that message that you sent. Does that, like, what are these different aspects? Like, is God as a person and like the universe or the energy like the same thing, or something different? And so I clarified very, very clearly. I explained the way it explains in the Journey Within, the section Who is God, the chapter Who is God, how there's 3 aspects of God realization: Brahman. And then I explained what Brahman is, how it is this all-pervading energy that emanates from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yogis often refer to it as the white light, etc. People perceive it as the universe, but that and that is an aspect of God, but emanating from God. And I explained how people who realize that, they do negate suffering and they do gain peace, but they become lonely ultimately because they don't have a relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And it's just the beginning of self-realization. I gave the train examples and the sun examples. But then as one progresses, one realizes Paramatma, which is our own personal expansion of God, who out of his unlimited love for us is situated in our hearts and has traveled with us throughout millions of lifetimes, never abandoning us and waiting for us to turn to him. And I explained, I won't go into too much detail about this because there's other things I want to say, but I explained how that's the next level of God realization. And then I explained, though, that the highest level of God realization is Bhagavan realization. And this is God in his original form as a person, and that we can have a personal relationship with him. And it's ultimately not until we come to this realization that we will be satisfied and that we will feel fully happy. And it was beautiful. Then we discussed the way different traditions in the world perceive personal God, and also how this personal Bhagavan form is explained in our scriptures. I explained to them what Krishna looks like and how we have details of who he is and who his family is and what he likes to do in our scriptures. We discussed all of this. So these ascending stages of yoga are to meet people where they're at and then bring them ultimately to Bhagavan realization. But it's interesting. Akrura says in his prayers that he says that, but all these people, my Lord, even those who have turned their attention away from you and are worshiping other deities are actually worshiping you alone, O embodiment of all the demigods. As rivers born from the mountains and filled by the rain flow from all sides into the sea, so do all these paths in the end reach you, O Master. And it says in the purport to that verse, a quote from the purport to Bhagavad Gita 9:23-25 from Prabhupada. Those who are devotees of other gods and who worship them with faith actually worship only me, O son of Kunti, but they do so in a wrong way. I am the only enjoyer and master of all sacrifices. Therefore, those who do not recognize my true transcendental nature fall down. Those who worship the demigods will take birth among the demigods. Those who worship the ancestors go to the ancestors. Those who worship ghosts and spirits will take birth among such beings. And those who worship me will live with me. So Prabhupada is clarifying that it's not, people have this misconception that all paths lead to the same place. And Prabhupada says, no, if you board a plane to Delhi, you're going to Delhi. And if you board a plane to California, you're going to California. So although all of the people who are worshiping other gods and demigods are actually worshiping only Krishna, because those demigods and other gods and other aspects of material creation are all emanating from Krishna. And Krishna also says that he gives people who worship the demigods, how do they get their faith? Krishna gives them their faith. So they are, in fact, actually all worshiping Krishna, but that doesn't mean that they all have the same outcome. Unless they elevate themselves to bhakti yoga and come to having the desire for Bhagavan realization, they're not going to get that. They're going to get what they are doing. I actually one time went to this place in Brazil to get some medical treatment. It was like a spiritual healing center, and they were working with higher spirits who would come and people would channel them and then they would heal you. It's called John of God. And they were taking baptism into wanting to go to that spirit realm to live with those spirits after their death. And I was thinking, this is exactly what Bhagavad Gita says. This is their desired destination, therefore they will go to that destination. So Prabhupada is clarifying that. But like Krishna gives them the faith to worship these different things, for at least, okay, this is where you're at least get within the realm of the Vedas, at least accept some authority so that you can gradually be purified. That's the whole reason why eating meat is abominable and it is completely not recommended. But like, why in the Vedas was that allowed for some people under certain rules and regulations? Because whatever you tell them, they're still going to eat meat. So at least regulate yourself, at least accept some authority so you can be purified in some way. So in today's verses, the yogis who, they're not on that level of pure devotional service, but they're seeing the Lord in this form of the living entities, us, the material elements that constitute the living entities' bodies, and the controlling deities of those elements. And so they're making advancement. They're being purified. And the brahmanas so these brahmanas they're not also like pure devotees. They're ritualistic brahmanas. They're following the regulations concerning the 3 sacred fires of worship by chanting mantras from the 3 Vedas and performing these elaborate fire sacrifices for the various demigods. So it describes in the purport those who follow the paths of Sankhya Yoga and the 3 Vedas, they are worshiping the Supreme. So this worship of the demigods is going to Krishna through the indirect method of karma kanda, right? So as we explained, still in the realm of having material desires, fruit of ritualistic rituals, religious rituals. However, one who wants to achieve eternal perfection should worship the Lord directly. and full Krishna consciousness. And Giri Govardhan Prabhu, he always would teach me that still, when we read the sections of the Bhagavad Gita on karma yoga, jnana yoga, ashtanga yoga, we actually can still get lessons that are applicable to our devotional service. And as you all know, Prabhupada translates, even in those sections of the Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada, he translates them in accordance with devotional service and instructions for us in pure devotional service. And in his purports, instructs us to follow pure devotional service, isn't it? Like, this is very, very clear. Prabhupada is giving us pure devotional service from the beginning. But Giri Govardhan Prabhu would always share with me that one who is advancing in Krishna consciousness, the desired advancement and benefit that comes from following the other processes should automatically be developing in one who's practicing Krishna consciousness. So we can also check ourselves by reading all of these things. Oh, in my practice of devotional service, am I having these results? Am I controlling my senses? Am I coming to the mode of goodness? Am I, absorbing my mind in Krishna? All of these things. And so when I asked Giri Govardhan Prabhu about these verses today, he wrote me this: I would look at this as beneficial for our integration of the spiritual and material. Because most people are too attached to the material, we often stress the difference between matter and spirit. In the 11th canto, Krishna says that someone is qualified for karma if they are too attached to the material, and they're qualified for jnana if they are too averse to the material. He says one who is not too attached nor too averse to the material world is qualified for bhakti, isn't it? Because we're not about rejecting or accepting the material. We're about pleasing Krishna. We're about serving Krishna. So Prabhupada emphasized over and over again that how is something material or spiritual? It's a matter of our consciousness and how we use it. The microphone is material if we use it to blaspheme, or material things, and it's spiritual if we use it to propagate Krishna consciousness. So the elements and devatas are also energies of Krishna. In bhakti, there is often an initial need to counter the too attached to material that most people are, right? And that's why Srila Prabhupada talks so extensively about the miseries of the material world. But if we are not careful, we can also easily go too far in the opposite direction, and we can become too averse. So in order to be not too attached nor too averse, we have to see all things being related to Krishna. So even though we're not trying to follow in the footsteps of the yogis and the brahmanas, we're trying to follow in the footsteps of the pure devotees, we can still read these two verses from today, and we can also aspire to see Krishna in the living entity and the material elements that comprise the living entity, and the controlling deities of those elements. We can try to see Krishna in everything. We should see Krishna everywhere and in everything. And for one who sees me in everything and everywhere is never lost to me, and I am never lost to them, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. So thank you very much. We'll end there and open it up for questions, comments, discussions. Adi Pushpa.
Never knowing what to say, we just pray to Srila Prabhupada. May we share whatever you like to say. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, let not the wise disrupt the minds of the ignorant who are attached to fruit of work. They should not be encouraged to refrain from work, but to engage in work in a spirit of devotion. So Mataji's explained very carefully the path, the process, the options we have. And as devotees, we have the task at hand for Krishna's pleasure of approaching others and by some means or another, give them access to what is uplifting. Just like an adult dealing with children, very carefully gives them prasadam, gives them something to do that is connected to Krishna consciousness, gives them an incentive. And this way, they benefit and they become purified and they advance. Just this morning, just as we were leaving 8th Avenue, some people came to the door. Right. This is happening more and more. There's a lot of living entities wandering around New York City. There's a great influx of refugees from other countries that are somehow or other fleeing uncomfortable situations, and they're trying to find some shelter, and so we give them prasad. We show them our affection, and by some means or another, even though we don't have accommodation for them, we can still give them access to Krishna consciousness. And Jayananda Prabhu, who is building the Rath Yatra chariot, he would say, prasad. You've heard him? Give them prasad. Prabhupada also said, give them prasad. Every guest, they may come to the darshan, they may come to the temple. They may not have the best motivation. They may not even understand the philosophy, but he would say, give them prasad. There's a tremendous power. Krishna manifests as prasadam, and people won't argue with a piece of cheesecake, right? As far as I know. And so we've been given a lot, and we meant to share it, and Krishna will show us how to include them, how to reach out to them, and give them understanding. Even that little girl, we mentioned this before, little Korean girl, a Korean friend of ours from the neighborhood, he was helping with prasad distribution, and he said, can I bring my daughter? I told you this, right? And I said, oh, of course, bring her, but don't just bring her. Explain to her what we're doing, why we're doing, and invite her and see if she chooses to come. A little 5-year-old girl, little tiny little girl, Madison. And so the second time she came out, I said to her, Madison, why do you come here? She put her hands on her hips and said, we're trying to show people that God loves them.
So beautiful.
I was like, explain, it's not a very complex principle. Even a 5-year-old girl, she understood it with great conviction, that she was explaining it to me. So we're trying to show people that Krishna loves them. That's the task at hand, and by whatever means. Anyway, some small thing to share. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Maybe somebody else has something to say. It's 8 o'clock. We don't have much time. The conch is blowing. Okay, all glories to Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Hare Krishna. Thank you all so much. Time for darshan now.
Das Prabhu, move it up a little bit, please. Hare Krishna. Welcome to the Lotus Feet Cam. Lotus Feet Cam makes us want more. Yeah, exactly. We see Guru Parampara, we see Varaha Narasimha, we see small deities, Chota deities of Shri Radha Muladhar. We see the Pujari's feet. The Pujari's name is Jagirdari, I believe. Yeah, there he is. Jagirdari. Can you put your lotus face in the image? Yeah, there he is. Yes. Great, great. Thank you, Prabhu. Wow.
This is called a personalized darshan.
Exactly, right? See, we waited and it was worth it. Thank you, Jeff.
Doesn't get any better than this.
Exactly. Thank you, Jagirdari Prabhu. Okay, this was the class. Jeffrey Eckler, come out of your ecstasy. Yeah. Okay, wonderful class, nothing to add. How wonderful is Krishna? Don't argue with Prashanam. That's my takeaway. Nice seeing everybody. We love you, we need you. Hare Krishna. Sundaranandaji, yes. We like your backdrop, Sundaranandaji. Is that Brahma Jyoti behind you?
It's actually blurred. It's Chaitanya. Let's see, can't get it in time. Yeah, it's too much. You can just see my face here.
Nice. It's still blurred, Prabhu, but we can see Lord Chaitanya.
I know. I have to figure out how to reverse the camera. I don't know if I can get. Yeah, there you go.
Jai, how beautiful.
Charikant forest.
You should add yourself on top of the deer, Sundaranandaji.
I'm just a wild animal there. So I think that.
Yeah, Sundaranandaji speaking in his humility. Jai. Okay, Shishirada Muralidhar ki jai, Shagura Chandra ki jai, Champakalata Sakhi, Dasi ki jai, Guru Parampara, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Give it to Krishna. Hare Krishna.